I think just when we were all starting to write Dabo Swinney and the Clemson Tigers off, maybe thinking that they're not going to be the threat that they have been in the past, Dabo goes out there and makes an immediate splash at the offensive coordinator position, which has been the downfall of this team for the past several seasons. And we kind of have to talk about it and talk about who he hired. But before we get into it, please go ahead, hit that like and the subscribe button. Let me know what you guys are thinking down in the comments below about the recent hire of Dabo Swinney, and what are your thoughts about the Clemson football program going forward. The Clemson Tigers and Dabo Swinney have made a tremendously huge move at the offensive coordinator position, now hiring Garrett Riley from TCU. Now, this name might sound familiar to your guys because Garrett Riley is the younger brother to Lincoln Riley, and Garrett Riley was just in the national championship with TCU getting mollywopped by Georgia. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, but I just said it. Anyways, mollywopped by Georgia in the national championship. But Garrett Riley's offense was nothing short of incredible pretty much everywhere he's been. And it's kind of similar to what Lincoln Riley runs. And so if you are any team in the country, why would you not want Garrett Riley as your offensive coordinator? And hence, we heard Alabama trying to hire Garrett Riley after they're going to, we would all assume they're going to part ways with Bill O'Brien, but that's a whole story for another day. But looking at what Garrett Riley did just this year, he led TCU to a 38.9 point per game average. In the passing game alone, which that's what the Rileys are good at, he had 261.7 and put his man Max Duggan in the what do you call it? The contention for the Heisman, which Lincoln Riley had also put Caleb Williams up there as well. So two Rileys had their quarterbacks in contention for the Heisman Trophy. And when you look at how many yards per game he averaged, 455 yards a game. And remember, Garrett Riley, he's a young up-and-coming offensive coordinator. Riley's career began at Roosevelt High School in Lubbock, Texas, as the team's quarterback coach and passing game assistant. Upon the completion of his degree in 2012, he was named the running backs coach at Augustana College in Illinois. He joined the coaching staff at Eastern Carolina in 2013 as a graduate assistant and was later promoted to outside wide receivers coach in 2015. Here's where it starts to get interesting. In 2016, he's brought on to Kansas as a offensive analyst. In 2017, he became the quarterbacks coach. In 2018, he became a tight ends fullbacks coach. In 2019, he took the job at Appalachian State to be the running backs coach. Then in 2020 and 2021, he became the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at SMU, leading them to a top 15 in both scoring and total offense with Riley as the play caller. In 2020, that was in 2020 and 2021. In 2022, he becomes the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach for TCU. Now, mind you, we just talked about the stats at what he did and put a Heisman Trophy candidate out there. That's important to note. And now he's at Clemson. And you would expect that with the talent that Clemson is able to get and with the quarterback that they have now in Cade Klubnik, Garrett Riley is probably going to be able to make a name for himself so quickly that he is going to be in contention for major head coaching jobs going forward. I would not expect Clemson being able to hold on to Garrett Riley probably longer than 2 years. But I would expect also Clemson to possibly have a Heisman Trophy winner in Cade Klubnik with Garrett Riley at the helm. I'm going to go ahead and make that statement here. But looking at what Clemson did since basically, 2011, since Dabo's pretty much been there, Dabo has been making moves at the offensive coordinator position to completely change the team and be able to help them. In the past 2 years have kind of been really rough for Clemson fans. Through 2011 through 2014, you had Chad Morris. And Chad Morris was lighting up people and then also was able to recruit Deshaun Watson to Clemson. And then Chad Morris leaves, and now you bring in Jeff Scott and Tony Elliott as co-offensive coordinators. So you don't have one offensive coordinator, you got co-offensive coordinators. Jeff Scott was in charge of the passing game and quarterbacks, and you had Tony Elliott in charge of the running game. In 2015, led them to a 14-1 record with Deshaun Watson, averaging 42.3 points per game, 291.5 pass yards per game, and 514.3 yards per game. Ultimately, they got to the national championship and lost to Alabama. In 2016, again, Deshaun Watson led 14-1 finish, 44 points per game, 333.9 pass yards per game, and 503.7 yards per game. Ultimately become the national champions. And then in 2017, you had a little bit of a down year as you're trying to figure out what you're going to do at the quarterback position. You have Kelly Bryant as your starter. They finished the season 12-2 with 33.3 points per game, 235.5 pass yards per game, and 429.6 yards per game. Still an incredible offense, an offense that a lot of the teams at that time would have taken. In 2018, though, you have the true freshman Trevor Lawrence step to the field, leading this offense to pretty historical numbers for Clemson. 44.3 points per game, 279 pass yards a game, and then 527.2 yards per game. Again, in 2018, Clemson goes to win the national championship. In 2019, you have Trevor Lawrence leading your team again, 43.9 points per game, 288.3 pass yards per game with 528.7 yards per game. They lose the national championship that year. Now you get to 2020. Jeff Scott leaves, takes the job at University of South Florida, where he just recently got let go, and Tony Elliott is your full-time offensive coordinator. He still had a lot of leftover players from the Jeff Scott era. Mind you, I said the Jeff Scott era for a reason, because let's dive into the stats of the Tony Elliott era. Still had Trevor Lawrence, 43.5 points per game, 502.3 yards per game, and then 348.5 pass yards per game. If you notice, with Trevor Lawrence, the pass yards per game progressively got better because they knew of the talent they had back there. Now in 2020, we also got to see DJ Uiagalelei as well. But remember, in 2020, you still had, I think, a good pool of guys left over from the Jeff Scott era. We still, I think, are running that scheme that maybe Scott was wanting to run. So DJ got to, I think, take a lot from that. In 2021, Clemson goes 10-3, which we haven't seen Clemson do that in a while. Tony Elliott's still at the helm as the offensive coordinator. And then you got DJ Uiagalelei as your quarterback. 26.3 points per game, 191.2 pass yards a game, 359.2 yards per game. Could we say that Jeff Scott was the reason that Clemson did so well all of those years? And can we say that with Jeff Scott leaving, DJ Uiagalelei was put in a position to not be successful because maybe Tony Elliott didn't know how to use him? In 2022, you have Brandon Streeter come in. DJ Uiagalelei is your quarterback once again. You get a little bit better, 33.2 points per game, 232.4 pass yards a game, and 410.3 yards per game. Ultimately, though, Clemson does not live up to the expectations that they want to in getting to the national championship. Now DJ Uiagalelei has transferred out of the program, and Clemson's really looking at themselves and going, how can we get ourselves back to national championship contention? And they see a superstar blossoming in Dallas-Fort Worth. And now, I'll say it again, now, they've got one of the best offensive coordinators in this game in Garrett Riley at the helm. And what are they going to be able to do? In no doubt in my mind do I think that Clemson is going to be able to be in contention for some of the best quarterbacks in the nation again, some of the best running backs in the nation, some of the best wide receivers. Because if one thing that we have noticed with the Riley tree, players on the offensive side of the ball are very intrigued with what the Rileys are able to do. whether you're a quarterback or anybody else, because they are able to put quarterbacks in the league at number 1 picks. Now, we've yet to see what Garrett Riley is able to do, and maybe we'll be able to see what he does with Max Duggan in terms of the NFL draft. But Lincoln Riley has had a lot of success, and with Garrett Riley running a very similar system, you would bet that maybe Garrett Riley will have similar success on the recruiting trail, pointing to what his brother does, assuming that he uses a similar system. And so Clemson making the move to go after Garrett Riley and keeping Garrett Riley out of the hands of Alabama and maybe potentially being a head coach somewhere else is tremendous. But this is also a great move for Garrett Riley, because let's say over this next year, you bring Clemson back to college football playoff contention and maybe even a national championship game. Garrett Riley will be considered for head coaching jobs going forward. And we know that with college football, if there is talent at the coaching position out there, people will fire their head coaches and go after them. So go ahead, jump down in the comments below. Let me know what you guys are thinking about the most recent hire for Clemson, and what are your expectations for Clemson and that football program going forward?